Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, Ireland's most reliable mobile network and proud sponsor of the Irish rugby team.
Now then, I think it is fair to say that Munster's season has reached a hell of a crescendo. Crowned URC champions in Cape Town a couple of weeks ago, and our next guest, Denis Leamy, has been a big part of that success. He needs no introduction, obviously. Just shy of 150 Munster caps in his playing days after his debut in 01. Big part of the 06 and 08 Heineken Cup winning years. 57 caps for Ireland. He retired in 2012, turned to coaching at amateur and local level, and then eventually found himself sleeping with the enemy in Leinster in 2019, and in 2022 returned to Munster, where he has looked after the defence as part of Graham Roundtree's coaching ticket. Denis Leamy, you are very welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Good to be with you.
No, it's great to have you with us. So life is good. Tip going well in the hurling as well. It's a nice summer now.
Yeah, we're still there. We're still very much alive. So yeah, loads to look forward to. Yeah, very exciting.
We invited you on in the immediate days after the win in Cape Town, but I would suspect you guys as a whole, coaching ticket players, given the schedule of Durban twice, Cape Town, Glasgow, Dublin, back to Cape Town for a final, and all big games as well, must have been shattered.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a hell of a run, in fairness, and it was a whirlwind, really. Just the amount of miles we're doing, big games coming week on week. Just amazing to be involved in it. But what an experience! But it was exhausting.
Yeah.
But come away with silverware at the end of it. It's an amazing achievement, really, and we're very much delighted with it. So we've been enjoying it and we've been celebrating it. So. Apologies, I couldn't make it last week.
You'd better places to be. I would think on a run like that, it's amazingly enjoyable, and you could almost sense the team getting battle hardened, and you slingshot from one game into the next, and it must be all consuming. Life, your life probably just goes into airplane mode, does it? Family, friends, I'll come up for air and see you when I see you.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And we're very lucky, we're very supportive families and wives and girlfriends and partners and stuff like that. So you couldn't do it without them. But exactly like that, you put your friends and your extended family kind of on hold and just, try and focus on the here and now and what's really important. And that was, as I said, big game after big game. And, in fairness, as we put it, we developed a hardness over that period, and going to places like Cape Town and Durban, and then having to go to Dublin, really, really big tests, and it was amazing to be a part of that, and just the preparation and just the whole journey of it was looking back now, it's the special part of it.
I would think so. We'll revisit that in a second. Maybe just to chart your last decade in brief enough terms. You retired in 2012. It was, from memory, a hip injury. You would have been 31 at the time. This was very much not the plan. I would suspect at 30, 31, you were looking forward to at least another 4 or 5 years, touch wood, keep playing.
Yeah, I just turned 30, and I had a kind of towards the latter end of my career, I had a number of injuries and just kind of seemed to come cruciate shoulders, and then my hip was niggling me after the World Cup, and it just never got right, and subsequently kind of learned that it was arthritic, and it was in pretty poor nick. And I just remember playing in my final game for Munster in Thomond Park. We played Llanelli in Europe, and we won. We went on a big Christmas party afterwards. I was supposed to play a week later against Ulster. I ran out a couple of days later to train and just wheeled around and just said to Tony McGahan at the time, I'm in absolute agony here. I don't think I can train, and that kind of, I suppose, spiraled then into operations and rehabs that didn't work, and unfortunately I had to retire 6 months later. And it was a big shock, because you don't expect that at 30, really. Other than that, I was in pretty good nick and very much involved with the Irish squads, and I had been involved in the 2011 World Cup with Ireland, and kind of looking forward to another 3 or 4 years. So pretty sudden, all of a stop. I had to give up, retire, and then what do I do next questions come into it. That's the worry,
Yeah, I'll bet it is terrifying. And so with an arthritic hip, I presume just the wear and tear of a rugby life, married to whatever genetics or play with arthritis. Like, can you actually perform as you were able to previously? It's just you're in agony, so I can't really keep going, kind of a thing. Or were you restricted even in how you were able to perform?
Yeah, like things were going fine until I got a really bad bang in in training at the World Cup, and that really just set things off. I'd been very functional, and well capable of playing, but then I got a really bad incident in the lead up just to I think it was against Wales in the quarter-final. I jarred it very badly in a tackle drill, and it just started from there. So I basically limped out of the game, and I was limping around for about a year afterwards. It was pretty bad nick, and to the point where I decided, look, I have to get a hip replacement. So getting a hip replacement at 31, it's pretty I suppose daunting, but I was very lucky in that I had a very good surgeon in Jonathan Bunn, and he reassured me that I suppose the life of the limb that I was about to receive, that it could work for 15, 20, 25 years, and the longevity of that gave me a lot of confidence to go on ahead and get the operation, because living in pain is not really what you want at that stage of your life. So it's allowed me as I say, live without pain and to get on with my life and run around after my kids and being pretty good nick. I
didn't realise you had it replaced. So you are running around with the kids. You're functioning pretty well now.
Just about keep up with a 6-year-old and 2 4-year-olds. So just about hold my own, yeah.
So like that is a terrifying moment, I'm sure, and you want to provide for your family, and you want to, I find, I suppose, something that's vaguely as enjoyable as your playing days as impossible, an order as that is. Where was coaching in your mindset? Did you have a burning ambition, or were you thinking about a bit of farming? I remember people saying, I have in my head people saying at the time, he might go back to farming.
Yeah, and I continue to farm to this day. I have a farm in Tipperary, which even this morning at about 7 o'clock, I counted my few cattle and walked the grounds and the boundary fences and stuff. So that's great. But yeah, look, anyone who's involved in farming knows, or the level of farming that we do in terms of beef farming, it's a difficult lifestyle in terms of paying the bills. But yeah, I think where coaching fell in, or what I was going to do next, really I contacted Mikey Prendergast at the time, because he was coaching young Munsters, and I had coached a little bit with Cashel, at seconds and thirds level, just while I was injured, just to get a feel for it, and I really enjoyed it. So I just contacted Mikey and said, look, stepping out of the game, I'm obviously retiring, would there be an opportunity with young Munsters? So he got me involved with young Munsters, and I really enjoyed working with Mikey and Garode, his brother, and the players there. And it was a very interesting 6 months in terms of learning how to, I suppose, the craft of coaching and the chats and the conversations you have with players and how you develop players. And that got me really interested in where I could go next.
Okay, interesting. Come here, as a complete aside, can you lads explain to me, why do you all call young Munster Munsters?
I have no idea. I have no idea. Absolutely no idea. Sorry.
Right, okay.
I didn't like me there.
Yeah, but it's definitely, it's always written as Munster, but it's always Munsters. Grand. No idea. Look, you're peculiar down there.
These guys will answer that question.
The call from Leinster comes in 2019. So at that stage, you're retired 7 years. How had you been, by the way, with the adjustment? Because I sort of remember you did like a road show with us not long after you were retired at the Mansion House. I think Johnny Sexton might have been there, or it was one of those nights anyway. And we don't know each other, and we didn't talk off air. But I remember having this sense, like even on stage, that you were kind of dipping your toe in this media lark and telling a few old stories from back in the day. But I just got the sense of someone who was thinking, geez, I do not want to be in this stuff already. Like, just, I almost think you were taking it and going, this is not, I don't want to be here at all.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. I think in terms of, I suppose you can do both, and some of my former teammates do it really well in terms of coaching and media. But I suppose it's hard to do both, is the way I put it. So yeah, I very much wanted to be a coach. Yeah. I wanted to, I suppose, carved that out along the way. And I started coaching Clonmel, which was our junior team. I worked with AIL with Gary Owen. I worked in my home club in Cashel, and on up into that. So I always had an idea that I'd stay in Ireland, that I'd try and go through the Irish system and trust the Irish system, because at that stage there wasn't an awful lot of Irish coaches coming through the system. But I believed that there was a pathway to get through if you kept your head down and you were pretty good at what you did and got results, that there was a way to climb the ladder. And I think that's been the real pleasing thing about, I suppose, the last couple of years, and that you're seeing Irish coaches now come through the pathway. You think of Mossy Lawler, Colm Tucker, guys like that who are climbing the ladder as well. So it's really pleasing to be involved in that. So Leinster gave me a great opportunity in 2019. There was an opportunity to go into the academy as an EPDO, and I suppose from their point of view, being an ex-Munster player, they're probably wondering, why is this guy putting his CV in? But in fairness to the lads in Leinster, they got me in, they trusted me. I really enjoyed working with everyone there. I hope that they got something from me, that the boys in their younger players that I would have worked with, like Joe McCarthy, Brian Deeney, to mention just a couple, that they would have learned a lot from me. So and I certainly learned a lot from being around that brilliant environment. Yeah,
I'll bet. How much abuse did you get from your teammates? Former teammates?
Yeah, nice bit, like
I'd say.
you need to have a thick skin both ends. I think in terms of early days in Leinster, you're viewed as with suspicious eyes, I think. But no, over a period of time, struck up some really, really great relationships there, and thoroughly enjoyed working in Dublin, I must say.
So you went from elite player development officer to contact skills coach in 2021. This is one of these roles that we hear about a lot, but I actually don't know specifically what you're hammering home day in, day out as a contact skills coach.
Yeah, it's very nichey, isn't it? I think you kind of make it your own. So what I try to do, and there's no right or wrong, I know Sean O'Brien is doing it at the moment, and I suppose everyone does it their own different ways, but I really try to develop the tackle and look at what we do around the carry, and certainly around the breakdown. The breakdown was a really big thing in terms of the environment and how that fitted into the game plan and the speed of ball. So that was really important, how we developed the placement of the ball, how early we can get our two guys over the ball into those spaces, and their body heights and their aggression around that. So it was all those little finer details around the contact area. When you talk about the tackle now, it's become such a big thing because of, I suppose, the concussion and everything that brings, and preventing injuries, but also making you a dynamic tackler and an efficient tackler in terms of completion and stuff like that.
Yes.
That's really important. So it actually all feeds into one. A safe tackler is also a good tackler, and worked, kind of every morning on that sort of stuff, pre and post pitches. You're doing a lot of video work around the breakdown in terms of what the boys have done in the game, and it's something that you wouldn't want to do forever. I don't think you want to box yourself in as a contact coach, but I'm really, really glad I was a contact coach, and I learned an awful lot around that piece, and I brought it into the greater defensive sort of system that we use.
Yes, because you would have just missed out, obviously, on Joe Schmidt's arrival with Ireland, and he was always talked about as a kind of a breakdown specialist, really, and described it as the heartbeat of the game, and that was a big focus for him. So if you just missed out on him, who did you I suppose base your breakdown coaching on? Did you just have that innately from playing the game? You knew what's what, or do you go off and study with somebody who really knows their stuff in that area? How do you equip yourself to be able to stand in front of a pretty impressive dressing room and say, fellas, this is what you do?
Yeah, I think I would have been heavily influenced by Laurie Fisher. We had Munster as a breakdown coach, and I suppose there's a number of different things to the breakdowners in terms of the speed you move and the body height and the aggression, but it's also the mindset of actually, wanting to get there, being in those positions, working early, almost being ahead of the game. And obviously, I think Joe left a big imprint around the breakdown in Ireland, and I think that filters down as well. So in different environments, you start to pick that up as well, and you would have been going to coaching clinics, and that sort of stuff was being drip fed down. And an awful lot of what we still do today, I think, would have been heavily influenced by Joe Smith, and has a big flavour in terms of what he brought around that time. So you add a little bit to that, or you subtract a little bit to that, depending on what you want. But I think it's fair to say what all the provinces do and what Ireland do will be heavily influenced by what Joe Smith would have brought.
Yeah. Given that it's a Leaving Cert month, every Leaving Cert question seems to have the phrase compare and contrast in it. So compare and contrast Leinster environment that you found with the Munster environment that you've come into now. It can be small stuff, how they go about their business, how they say hello to each other in the morning, how they set out their aims for the season, or do they focus on one game at a time? You know, I know you don't want to betray too many secrets, but you're one of the few people who could probably answer that question. How would you compare the two cultures of ways of going about their weeks?
I think both are very different, and what works well in one environment probably wouldn't work in the other. But there are certainly certain things that are, just good standards or ways that you'd like to have an environment. And I think Leinster, and this is no secret, like Leinster's environment is top class. The way it's run, the way from top to bottom in terms of the staff, the players, it's a really, really well-oiled machine. And there's loads of brilliant stuff in Leinster that they do brilliantly well, and they foster it so well and they develop it so well. Munster is different, though. The Munster people are slightly different. There's a different mentality. I suppose there's a little bit of a rawness to the Munster mentality. And you leave your feelings at the door in Munster a little bit more than you would in Leinster.
That's still the case, yeah.
Yeah, there's always a little bit of ball hopping and a bit of trying to get in under a fella's skin and stuff like that, which is a good thing. And I think. Both environments are very interesting. Both environments you love being a part of, but they are slightly different. But
is one louder than the other?
Louder in terms of just voices and
the dressing room. Yeah.
I don't know. I think you've great characters in both. I think it would be unfair to say one is louder than the other or more boisterous. But I will say this. I think the way Leinster have developed their systems and their dressing room over the last 10 years allows them, just to be in that position to fight for European Cups, for example. We're just a little bit off that right now, as our record would show. So we're still developing around that, and we won't try and do what Leinster do exactly. But there's loads of good stuff that Leinster have learned and borrowed from other environments that certainly would be relevant to us as well. Yeah. But we still have a good bit to go in terms of our own development, and we know that. I think the players know that. We as coaches know that. But look, it's going to be fun on that journey. No,
I'm sure. The reason I have asked about the louder point is when you talked about, there's a touch more leave your feelings at the door at Munster, which was like always the case in your team in particular, I suppose. But also I was reading a piece recently where Stuart Lancaster, I think he microphoned up players and played back recording. Was a piece I read in the Sunday Times. Two of them mightn't have been under when you were there as well, but almost just like say you can be louder on the pitch when you're talking to each other. And I sort of feel, Peter O'Mahony and co would be quite loud to each other, so it's just a hunch when I asked the question. And in terms of like how they'd again, if you can't give secrets, I understand, but like map out a season, I would think in Leinster European Cup is kind of holy grail territory, and Munster in a very different place.
Yeah, and Leinster have earned that right, haven't they, over a period of time, to put together the squad they put together. Huge investment in terms of time and energy, and obviously brilliant coaches like Stuart and
would they frame it as like, would European Cup be talked about every week? This is towards the European Cup. Is it that kind of an obsession, healthy or otherwise?
No, I don't think. I think it's just a constant standard of excellence, isn't it?
Yeah.
Arriving on a Monday morning on time, you're there early, you're doing your prehab, all the boring bits and pieces really that are just so important of being a pro, being a really pro, being a good person, coming in, shaking hands with everyone, saying hello, saying good morning. Those sort of practices, can never be underestimated, can they really, in terms of how important they are to an environment. I think that's what a really good environment looks like. And just the constant striving for excellence and betterment, is something that I think a lot of clubs would envy.
Yes. And you've been around the game a long time, so say as a player and then seeing Leinster and now seeing Munster, are these dressing rooms likely at half time to put up their hand and say, well, actually I think that tactic isn't working, we should do X, Y or Z? Or is it very much you're the coach, we're the players, we'll listen, you talk?
No, I think both would be very much collaborative. I think and that's really important in the modern game. It's not like old where you sit down as a player and you take the information and it's very much a I'll tell you what to do and you go and action it. I think it's very much collaborative, and certainly, in Munster at the moment, we're trying to grow in that hugely in terms of our classroom, in terms of our half time. What are you feeling? How do you feel? What does it look like out there? Because we're sitting above in the stand, we're looking down. We're very much seeing the play as the fans would see it. So, but the boys are in that action, and it's so much different when you're in action, when you're in that hand-to-hand combat. It just feels completely different. What you're seeing, how it feels, that's just so different. So we'd always ask in terms of how they feel, what they're seeing, what they reckon is on out there, and then we'd try and reinforce that with our points and back that up with what we're seeing as well. And that collaboration is so important, because if they don't feel it and they don't see it and they don't actually believe that the space is there, or that the opportunities to attack the breakdown defensively are there, it's a waste of time, isn't it, really?
Yeah. So you're quite happy at half time for someone to pipe up and say, Leamy, this defensive plan is rubbish.
It's not ideal, is it? But I think I would rather them say that than not. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Hell, if the plan isn't working, it's not working. So yeah, come out and say it, and that's really important. And we'd say that all the time. In fairness, like Wig, Mikey, we talk about that all the time. If the players aren't happy, if we're not comfortable, say it. It's important. Tell us exactly how you see it as well, and they do. In fairness,
did the way because it's funny, your team, like the 06-08 team, played some great rugby. So it's I think we should note that. Did the way Leinster played their rugby, the attacking flair that we see, the emphasis on skill sets, did that inform the I hate to use the word philosophy, but just how you saw the game going forward as a coach? Or would you have always said that's the way to go versus what, say, Van Gran, not that I don't want to land you in trouble here, I'm trying to pick my examples, but the way Munster were going about their business in a different way to Leinster? Did you look at Leinster and that, because we're seeing a more expansive Munster style, and that's obviously Mike Prendergast and Graham Rowntree sets a tone, but to what extent did seeing how Leinster play their rugby inform how you might see the game as a coach?
Yeah, I'll take you right back. I was coached by a New Zealander in Rockwell, the late 90s, and he was from Auckland, and they played a style of rugby that was very open. And we played in the Munster schools, which would be generally forward orientated. But under Hogan Chapman, I was very used to a 15-man game. I then went to UCC, which was a college team, and played AIL, and in AIL 2 at the time, the old Division 2, and it was proper tough. It was really tough. You go to places like Malone, Ballynahinch, Middleton, like you didn't need a ball at all to play. But we wanted to play rugby. We wanted to play 15-man rugby. We didn't have a scrum. We didn't have a line-out or a maul. So everything was off the top if we could win it. We never won our scrums. I played a number 8. I very rarely remember the ball at my feet. Yeah. And it was just all about free-flowing rugby, offloading, game of movement. Like Stuart talks about a game of movement, and the modern coaches talk about a game of movement. We were playing a game of movement in UCC, 20 years ago. And I was hugely influenced by that. So when I broke into the Munster team and we started to kind of mix with the Limerick clubs and the Limerick mentality and the senior teams of young Munsters and Gary Owen and Shannon, and to meet guys like Foley and Galway and Clossies and their mentality of how they played the game and the physicality, the scrum, the maul, the tight, it was different to what I was used to. So my bias would have always been a little bit more free flowing in terms of how I saw the game. I know I'm a defence coach, but I always would have played with teams as a kid growing up where we moved the ball. So, and I agree with you. The Munster team that I played on, I think we played an awful lot more rugby than maybe people like to remember. But that's besides the point. But definitely, when I went to Leinster, the game of movement, the speed of movement, the transfer of ball, how you transfer the ball, how you create quick rucks, I really, really, really enjoyed that aspect of the game, and how, you know, Stuart was growing that, you know, how Felipe was growing it, and their views in the game. It just really probably fed into my biases as a rugby coach as well.
Okay, so you were saying, Felipe, this is what we were doing in TIP in the 90s. So really that's so interesting. I hadn't realised that kind of limerick, the various dynamics, the melting pot that is Munster rugby. When you get the call from, is it Roundtree who gives you the call, Denis?
Yeah, he rings me out of the blue one day,
and so I'll get that full conversation in a second. But when he rings you, is there a degree where you're thinking, well, I want to know how you play first, or were you just going no matter what, even if he had said to you, Denis, we're going to tuck that ball and not pass it once? We didn't talk tactics, I'll be honest with you. He just rang me out of the blue and said, he rang me and we're chatting away, and I kind of said, so why are you ringing me? And he said, I want you to coach the defence. I said, okay. Did you know each other?
No, we didn't, and we hadn't spoken before either. So no, he just rang me out of the blue, and it wasn't really something, because I knew there was an ongoing process in place to try and find coaches. I presume that had passed me by, you know. I was very much focused in terms of what I was doing in Leinster and everything that was going on there. And then I got the phone call, and he just said, look, I want you to coach defence. And I just said, look, what's your views on it? He said, I'd like us to be a little bit more hot in terms of our line speed and what we do there, and that was all. I said, okay. I said, obviously, look, you're going to have to give me a couple of days, and yeah, I sat down and thought about it, and I went to Leo, and we had a conversation around it, and I spoke to him around, you know, the opportunities in terms of taking on a defence brief myself, and obviously I was living in Tipperary, I was commuting to Dublin. That was, you know, an hour and 45 minutes up the road. I commute, you know, in the mornings now, it's taking me 45 minutes, and I'm home every night, while I was staying with my aunt in Terranure twice a week in Dublin. So it was just, you know, things like that, practical things, day-to-day life that needed to be considered, and I suppose they were really the important things for me at the time, more so than, you know, how are we going to play, or you know, want to kick a lot, are we going to be kick chase, are we going to pressurise, whatever, doesn't matter. That was really where my head was at the time.
Leo Cullen's reaction?
I would say Leo is a very level-headed man. I presume he wasn't doing cartwheels, you know, but I think he's, you know, Leo's a very fair man. He listened to what I had to say. I think he understands the nature of having a young family and everything that entails. Obviously, you know, being from the province as well is a factor, and I think Leo was very fair in terms of understanding where I was coming from, and I really appreciated that from him, and it's something that, you know, it's something that you don't forget either, you know.
Yeah, I'll bet. Do I have it in my head that you weren't celebrating in the coach's box against Leinster?
Yeah, I saw that. Part of it was just weariness in terms of it was a hell of a game. There was so much going on, and there was 29,000, I think, in the stadium. It felt like there was 100,000. The atmosphere that day was amazing. Obviously, it was a very close game, but yeah, like the other thing is, yeah, you're right. Like I think where you're going with this is, I'd have huge respect for everything that Leinster do, what they stand for, the people in the building, the players, the coaches. And I would have a good grasp in terms of how they were feeling at that particular time. I know they're so driven to win championships, and there's a little bit of that in terms of you don't to rub it into people's faces either, especially when you've worked with them.
Yeah, because initially when I saw it, I thought, geez, Leamy is cool as a cucumber. And then I thought, the Leinster connection, maybe, respect is probably too strong a word, but I'm not going to be jumping up and down with people I worked with just a few months ago.
Yeah, I think it's important to respect. I think that's the word. You hear it all the time. And my respect for the Leinster environment and as I said, the people there is huge. So yeah, absolutely delighted in terms of what we did that day. From a Munster point of view, we went and executed a game plan. We played the game the way we wanted to play. We missed opportunities, but we also had to defend some really, really good Leinster attack. And, I was incredibly proud of Munster that day and incredibly proud of the way we played and everything we did that day. And we, look, I know Leinster had a massive game the week after, and there were selections and things like that. But that Leinster team that took the park that day, incredibly gifted as well, so yeah. I was no mean feat beating those boys.
We won't go through the season in granular detail, don't worry, but those first 7 games, Munster lose 5 of them, and then I think even one of the wins was like Treviso scored 3 tries in the first half, don't get the bonus try in the second half, so that wouldn't have felt great either. Yeah, my memory of it from this remove is of balls being dropped, nightmares at the breakdown. Interestingly, seeing as you mentioned, your breakdown work, talk of they're not fit enough we're not fit as we need to be to play the game we're trying to play, and so behind the scenes on those 45-minute commutes to Tipperary, are you thinking, oh man, we're like young coaching ticket, this is really bad, or very confident it was going to come good?
I think the most important person, and you mentioned the young coaching ticket, was Wig. He's experienced and he's, I suppose, all he's gathered over the years as a player and a coach. He's been an assistant coach for so many years, but his experiences were so important to us at that time. He would just say to us, keep going, lads, it's working. What we're doing is different. It's so different to what they're used to, but it's working. This is going to work. And I think he gave us a huge amount of hope as a coaching group and confidence to just go ahead and stay going. And it's funny, we're telling all the media, we're telling all the supporters, we're training really well, and and what we're doing, and the boys are getting it. And it doesn't really matter at all because, at the end of the day, you need to be winning. But there was a huge trust in what we were doing. We changed an awful lot. You mentioned the breakdown. There was a different mentality around the breakdown in terms of what we're doing. Completely different in terms of attack, different defence, different line-out systems. So everything was different. And we did so much at the boys. We asked so much of them. Along with that, we're training. We're training them so hard. We're putting them through sessions that they've just haven't done before. So a number of them start to get injuries, and soft tissues start to become a problem. And that just all, I suppose, was what we had to work our way through for the first 6 months. But there was huge belief that we get to the end of that, we get out the back end of that, right, that the results would start to come. Okay. Look, it's easy to sit here now and bring us rosy and we can look back, but no, I think there was a huge trust in our room. If we're anything in that room, we trust each other hugely, and that's the great thing about coaching with this group in Munster. There's a great collaboration and trust amongst each other. I should say, by the way, Wig is Graham Roundtree, right? Wig is Graham Roundtree, yeah, and he insists on being called Wig, so that's why I'm calling him Wig. Why? Not disrespectful. Okay. Why is he Wig, by the way? I have no idea. You'll have to ask him that himself. Okay. Maybe it's to do with his hairline. I don't know. Because I don't know how much you were bothering to tune into Off the Ball on your drives home to Tipperary, but everybody was giving you kicking. We were giving you kicking, all of that stuff. How much did that noise infiltrate? I think as a Munster player and as a Munster coach, you have to be very careful what you listen to, and we're judged by the highest standards. And I certainly, as an ex-player and a coach, and we as a coaching group, we'd always want us to be judged by the highest standards. I think that's what Munster is. We don't want to be judged in mediocrity. We want to be judged at the highest standards. But the difficulty in being judged by the highest standards is when you are losing, you're going to get a fair old whacking from the outside. But I think it's important that you remove yourself from that a little bit. You trust the people around you. You trust the environment. They're the things that are most important. And I remember being absolutely, as a player, and been absolutely slated for losing European semi-finals or whatever, and the criticism was always part of it, and that's just the way it is. But you talk about, people sometimes refer to what the era I played in as being the golden era. The amount of times we would have received flack and criticism, that was just part of it. So now when it happens now, I try to be very balanced on it. And even when people give us credit now, you try and be really balanced in that, and just you take the good with the bad, but you remain balanced. And you're never as good as people say, or never as bad as people say. That's something that Decky would have always said to us, and I think that's a really good way to just go about things.
Yes, there's probably a reason he's had such longevity in the game. The win over South Africa is talked about for obvious reasons as this very memorable occasion, and felt like a kind of line in the sand and marked progress. Do you regard it as this huge seminal moment?
Well, I think it's very important in our season, because it was just a different pressure. There wasn't huge pressure on us. So it wasn't league, it wasn't Europe. It was a one-off game against a touring side. The boys could go out, enjoy the atmosphere, huge amount of people in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. There was no pressure. No matter what happened that night, whether we won or lost, it wasn't really, I suppose it wasn't going to impact us hugely in terms of if we lost, if we turned up, played well and lost by a few points. It wasn't going to matter. But I think what it showed the boys is how special it is to win big games for Munster. And I think once you get a feeling for that and a hunger for that, you want more, and it drives you. And I think that opened, some of our younger players' eyes in terms of what you can do in a Munster jersey. You can do some really special things in a Munster jersey.
Yes.
Go out, punch above, your weight and beat teams like South Africa. And I think that was so important from that point of view. Gave us belief, gave everyone a little bit of a pep in their step, and we kicked on. And look, there was tough games and tough times after that, but we started to get more positive moments than negative.
That's really interesting, and getting that taste for kind of the possibility that goes with Munster, and maybe in a way the ghosts of your team, which akin to Liverpool for years, or any number of teams where there's success followed by a dip. Suddenly it's less of like, God, look, you'll always be compared unfavourably to that team, and more a sense of, geez, there might be something a bit special about this place, and maybe we can tap into it, and there is such a thing as DNA, and all of that kind of stuff starts to just the mood of it shifts almost completely 180.
Yeah, I think that was really important. We have a really good history, and we're really lucky that we have a very interesting history in Munster. And ever before, I suppose, the club element came along in terms of playing in European Cups and leagues and stuff like that, we were beating touring sides. So we leaned on that in the early days, and I know Decky drew on that with his early teams in the noughties. And I think it's important we go there. We don't go there all the time.
Right.
It can't just be that.
Yeah.
But it's part of us. And, I just get the sense that maybe there was times there when people, in the last few years wanted to distance themselves from Munster teams of the past. I think it's important to have that history and that heritage, and understand there's there's sort of a greater thing happening outside in Munster in terms of the supporters, the history, what has happened in the past, the big games, European Cups, that sort of stuff. We can draw on that a little bit. And at the end of the day, we're the same sort of genetics, we're from the same areas. You talk about the teams that I would have been part of, these guys were from Cork, they're from Clare, they're from Limerick, they're from Tipperary. It's the same as we have. So you draw strength from that. I believe that's really important.
One phase of the season I wanted to ask you about. So before, like, the amazing crescendo, was that period where Scarlets, Glasgow, and then Sharks in the Champions Cup. Really disappointing, back under pressure again in the URC, and then dumped out of Europe in fairly comprehensive fashion. 130 points conceded in 3 games was the headline. So, like, is the defence coach kind of looking at his feet as the rest of the coaching ticket lean forward and look down at him at the end of the row? I mean, that's an uncomfortable stat for you.
Yeah, it is. And unfortunately, that's the nature of being a defence coach. When you win, like, you're kind of an afterthought, and then when you lose, everyone turns, and, you know, automatically, I think, you know, you're someone who's going to be on the end of the stick. But no, I think, look, to be fair, tough ones to take. You know, Durban, the same day was we didn't play well. We made a lot of mistakes in possession. They transitioned very well, and we struggled in the heat without looking for excuses. It was horrific heat and humidity down there, and we just struggled. We were poor that day. Against Scarlets, we were winning the game really well, and it's just like someone flicked a switch on the 55th minute. We just seemed to shut down. You know, it was just a difficult time in the building. We'd lost Tom Tierney around that time, and yeah, it was a strange time in our building, because, you know, it brought back, you know, bad memories as well of what happened with Axel and stuff like that. So that whole period was difficult to manage, and you know, everything that went on there in terms of, I suppose, how emotional it is, and going through the process of that week and being around. And rightly so, you know, for the family and everything like that. They were factors in the background, and we probably, you know, in hindsight, maybe didn't manage that as well as we could have. But the Glasgow game was just really disappointing. We were way off, and it was a massive wake up to us all in terms of, we just need to refocus here now. That there's something a little bit off here. We're not hitting our straps. Defensively, it forced me to go away and really look in terms of what we're doing around our line speed, and in terms of our first 5 defenders around the ruck. And we, to put it very simply, we just weren't at it. We weren't busy enough. We weren't doing our roles well enough. Everyone has a role in terms of what they do around the breakdown in terms of the first 5 defenders. We just were doing it consistently poor. So we just started to measure that an awful lot more, put an awful lot more accountability on the players. And, you know, I think that gave us much greater confidence on the edges, and we started to win the gain line a lot more than we had been previous to that. And, you know, it was a good learning curve for me as a coach.
Yes, I'll bet. How much of your life, Denis, is spent in a dark room watching tape and taking notes and all of that business?
I think it's important to work smart, you know, that kind of way, and you know, I would talk to people, and you would take things, especially from the national team and the better teams in Europe, and in terms of what they're doing.
Right. And can you is the avenue there for you to give Andy Farrell a phone call, or the camp a phone call, and say, what are you guys thinking about line speed here?
Yeah, I speak to Simon from time to time, okay. and you know. He would always, just in terms of, give a flavour as to what they would like from an Irish point of view in terms of what their players are doing. So, and look, everyone is doing similar stuff, slightly different. Mm-hmm. You know, you look at what Leinster are doing. They connect really well. They're not as hot off the line as us. We have greater line speed. We challenge the ruck an awful lot more than what Leinster would do. But we miss more tackles than Leinster, because Leinster connect and they come off the line, and they're very, very accurate in terms of the amount of tackles they make. So we're very comfortable with having a little bit more heat and maybe missing a few more tackles, because we feel that I suppose our cover defence will mop up the bits and pieces we miss. Everyone is pretty much systemically very similar. It's just little tweaks here and there.
As a coaching ticket, I'm not going to call him Wig. I don't know him well enough to. Roundtree and Prendergast and yourself, for instance, your dynamic must have grown across the season. And you've spent a lot of time together, I'd say, a lot of flights, a lot of chats, a lot of coffees. So what's the nature of that, for instance? Say team selection and you think X should play over Y. Can you say, bang your fist, 100% lads, I'm right about this, Leamy demands it, we're going with it, or is it a very much final word Roundtree, or how has that dynamic blossomed? Because there's never a manual as to how it should all work.
And you left out two really important individuals there in Andy Kiriakou and George Murray as well.
Yeah.
And Andy obviously has done a massive job with the forwards, an amazing job with the forwards, and George looks after our exits in terms of, and that's been just such a massive strength for us, allowing us to, I suppose, get after teams. So our exits have been incredibly good, the best in Europe by a good bit,
right.
And it just allows us to have that springboard to either get the ball back or actually go after teams in the first three phases in terms of defence. So it's he's done an amazing job there, an excellent job. But when we sit down and it's collaborative, we have some very frank discussions. You would have seen the amount of different probably Munster teams that took the field.
Yeah.
Hard calls we made, players picked, players not picked, selection debates around a number of areas. And I suppose it's everyone gets their speak, everyone says what they feel, and ultimately, we will be the deciding factor, as it should be. But we all got a fair crack at the whip. And look, we don't see eye to eye, and you wouldn't want it that way either, because certainly coming into the final, you had an amazing amount of, I suppose, different options. We had 30 players. Most of our players were fit, and you're trying to decide, is it John Hodnett or is it Alex Kendlin? These sort of things. Do you play RG Snyman in the second row and move Ty Byrne back? These sort of debates, and it's just brilliant to have that. But ultimately, Wick has to take the credit in terms of what he selects and the team that takes the field.
What were your emotions at full time in Cape Town?
Unbelievable. It just pride, really. I was just incredibly proud of the lads, and it means so much just to win as a Munster coach, as a player as well. It just means a lot, to represent where you're from. And I just thought the boys were fantastic.
Yeah.
I thought we won the game. We hammered them by 5 points.
Hammered them. It was not a 5-point win is the absolute worst you could have come away with. Yeah, and I just thought we played really well, and we were so brave. And we spoke about being brave all week, about calmness and about our poker face under the sort of what would be the word, being the antagonistic nature of some of their players, and how we dealt with that, and the crowd, 50,000 of them versus 5,000 of our fans. A real cauldron, it really was. I've been to the biggest stadiums in the world and played in front of some partisan fans, but these guys, it was a circus, as one of our members said, or one of our coaches said. It was an absolute circus, and we dealt really well with that. We were calm, we were poker face, we were brave, we looked to play, we made mistakes, we had tries cancelled out, we didn't get the rub of the green maybe once or twice around certain decisions. Just stayed going. We stayed going, and 4 minutes from time, we come up with the big play and eventually cracked them. And it was hugely special in the way we won it, and that's why I was probably incredibly proud of the lads. There was a number of reasons why maybe you could tap out. We just didn't tap out. We stayed going, and even at the end, we come up with a massive play in the maul from the boys there, just holding them up and making that a scrum and not allowing them to have phases where they're so dangerous. Yeah. That was huge. And to win it like that was special. Oh, amazing. Because we made the point here after the Leinster game and also after the final that even if Munster hadn't got over the line in either of those games, the way Munster tried to play rugby is like it's just night and day from where the province had been. And of course you don't want to speak ill of previous coaches by any means, but like what we have seen here and what's been so exciting, I think, for Munster fans, Denis, over the last 6 months in particular, is coaching ticket who have stayed the course and followed their vision, and then a whole bunch of players doing things that we haven't seen them do before. and a style of rugby we just haven't seen before. And so for it to work out so spectacularly, I mean, you kind of couldn't have wished for more really in year one, I think.
Yeah, and massive credit to Mikey Prendergast in terms of how he's put in place a framework and that allows the boys to play. And, you know, it's just encouragement to go and play, transition, you know, penalty advantage, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Have a crack, have a go. You know, we train very fast, which has developed, I suppose, our offloading game. You'll see us throwing something like 20 offloads against Leinster. That's a huge amount of offloads, and just to have that, I suppose, ability to play fast to off rucks or play off the tackle or whatever it may be. And I think Mikey's been really, really impressive around everything he's done in attack, how he's allowed the boys and given them belief. And, you know, at times when you're losing, the easiest thing to when you're losing would be to look at the game plan and we'll kick more, or we'll be more conservative. No, let's stay playing, boys. Let's stay believing, be brave. And, you know, I think that's what you saw in the final in Cape Town. A really brave team, not afraid to make mistakes, knowing that there was going to be mistakes, but knowing that we stay at it, we keep pounding the rock, eventually we'll break it.
Yes. Do you get much of a break now? What's your deal?
I think we get 6 weeks off. I think, yeah, which is a huge amount of time off compared to what I would be used to. So we're getting 6 weeks off. Then we go back. I think it's around the 24th of July, and we're at it. Then we have to figure out how we grow and how we get better. And the inevitable pressures, you know, will come from the outside as well, which is great. And you know, we'd welcome that in terms of our own ambitions to go on and get better. That's certainly something that we want to do.
Yes, I'll bet. Well, look, it's been amazing. One last one, which has just popped into my head, actually, and I probably should have asked it earlier. It's a weird note to finish on, but people might be interested. Joey Carbery has had a terribly rough 6 months where he's gone from, you know, very much part of an Irish setup and to the fore at Munster to now not being part of this great finale. And he just feels like he's too much of a talent to be allowed wither away. Why so off the pace at Munster, Denis, and what can be done there to get Joey Carbery back to his best? Why over the last 6-7 weeks was it very much Jack Crowley and Ben Healy to the fore and less so Joey?
Well, I think first and foremost, Joey had a really strong start to the season and played, you know, every big game for us and did very well. You know, we lost games, but it certainly wasn't down to anything Joey was doing. We were still trying to figure out what we were doing as a team. I think, and this is the important thing, we talk about watching training and we select and train and we picks the team on a Thursday, which is quite unusual in terms of teams are normally picked by a Tuesday afternoon and delivered to the players.
Right.
But we hold off until Thursday, just because training isn't so important in terms of what goes on there. And you know, over the last, you know, 6, 7, 8 weeks, you start to see, you know, performances in training like Ben Healy and what he was starting to do. And you're kind of saying, this guy, he's come back from the Six Nations. He's really confident. He's doing amazing things in terms of his kicking game and training, his passing game. You know, he's running the attack against the defence and he's finding ways to unlock it. And you stand up and take notice. So it's not so much as Joey's playing poorly. He wasn't, or that he's lost form. He hasn't. I think the performances of Jack Crowley and Ben Healy probably catapulted them into the 23. And that's why it's hugely important that you're not set in stone in your selection, or you really sit down. And this goes back to my point earlier. We sit down and we talk about selection 2, 3 times, 4 times before we select a team. And it's just so those sort of things come out. And, you know, we felt that probably Ben, especially against the South African teams, just gives us that a little bit more in terms of variety, if you like, against that real line speed that they brought. And he was excellent. Ben was excellent. Yeah. But that is no slight on Joey Carbery. We were very, very lucky to have 3 real quality 10s, and they're a massive reason why we're successful.
Well, listen, it's been great talking to you. Congrats on a fantastic year, and enjoy the break, because I'm sure it'll be full on again next year.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that.
Appreciate it. Cheers. Dennis Leamy, Munster's defence coach, with us on the line on Wednesday Night Rugby. Big thanks to him, because he gave us a lot of time there and it was a great chat. And our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, Ireland's most reliable mobile network and proud sponsor of the Irish rugby team. Denis Leamy with us there.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, Ireland's most reliable mobile network and proud sponsor of the Irish rugby team.